Welcome to the Masters Alliance podcast, Uncut. I'm her Perez. Today, I am joined by my first international guest and a man who has done amazing things in the Olympic sport of Taekwondo and in the martial art of Taekwondo in Great Britain. Master Michael McKenzie has sat at virtually every table inside his country and on the world stage. And today, he shares his thoughts about the future of Taekwondo, where it's heading, but more importantly, why he continues to be passionate about trying to help it grow on the world stage. Relax, strap in. As always, this is going to be an amazing podcast. Welcome to the Master Alliance podcast, Uncut. And today I'm joined by one of the most influential people I've met in the sport, in the art, but more importantly, probably in the world movement. And he's our first international guest, of which I'm really proud because knowing him throughout the years and then watching what he's done for the sport and for all of us, I'm just excited to have him on today. And I'd like to welcome Master Michael McKenzie. How are you, sir?
I'm very well, thank you. And I'm really honored to be invited to take part in this podcast and interview. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Well, you've just been amazing to watch. You've been a strong and steadfast voice in the movement, and you've helped us over the years understand what was possible. You've helped your country, your athletes, go from just average performances like we all had back way, way, way back when. And then by using the movement and all the things available to us, you now have created, along with others in your country, one of the most influential programs in the world with a number of world and Olympic champions. But I want to talk more about in the beginning. Your Taekwondo journey spans decades. Can you share what ignited your passion for the martial art and how this passion has evolved over the years?
That's a great question. Well, it's like asking somebody why they breathe. It's like, do you still enjoy taekwondo? I don't know. I just do it. This is it. I started when I was 10 years of age. I was, I think, probably the thing that got me interested in martial arts in the beginning was the old Kung Fu TV series with David Carradine. So this is like, yeah, I was too young to see anything Bruce Lee. I didn't know. I've never heard of him when I was that age. I was too young for that. Um, I was in the Cub Scouts, and there was a guy picking on a bigger guy, on a smaller guy, should I say, and I got involved with it and got into a little scuffle. So our Cub Scout leader, Kayla, said to me, go and try some boxing, just because I was seen as a little fighter, which wasn't me at all. It's just I was in that situation. So I went boxing for a few weeks, but I didn't like the fact that I didn't really understand what sparring was. So when people were hitting me and I didn't understand the difference between sparring and fighting. So when people punched me in the face, I wanted to hit them really hard and stop the fight, as it were. And then a friend of mine called Stephen Simpson, I'm still in touch with him today. He invited me to what I thought was a karate class because I'd never heard of Taekwondo. And I went along with him. That was March 1979. And I've been doing it ever since. It turned out it was Taekwondo. I know the dates because I used to keep a diary then as a kid. And in that diary, I used to be scribbling, the old fist logos and drawing people kicking. And it's been an obsession with me ever since. The way that I took it on to the next level was I was training in a club, and we never really went out of our when we say club, it's a school. In the UK, all the clubs are, I mean, all the schools were amateur. So it's like 2 nights a week in a church hall or a community centre or a sports centre. So I was in this little mining town in the north of England, and we went, and there was maybe 70, 80 people training at some points, all men, you know, mostly a lot older than us. There was three of us that were children, the rest were men, young men. Um, some of them didn't like us training, the younger ones training, so we used to get pretty roughed up. I used to cycle 3 miles to the class, and then I'd walk back because my nose was bleeding or my lips were bleeding, and I was from a very large family, a very rough family. And if my dad had seen that these guys had done this to me, he would have gone with a few of my uncles and not unarmed as it were. So it would have been quite interesting. So I had to walk home and get rid of the blood before I got there. But I got them all back, so it's okay. You know, it was a much more physical experience back then. What was done to us would be classed as child abuse nowadays, hitting people with sticks when they moved out of the stance and, press ups on knuckles for wanting to go to the toilet or have a drink or something. But it was traditional, it was old school training. I was really interested in it. I was trying to, I was reading the American magazines at Taekwondo Times because there weren't the combat magazine in Britain. There wasn't anything too Taekwondo specific. That's when I first came across you a few years later and followed your career as much as possible through magazines at the time. Um, and then realistically, I got dissatisfied after about 6 years. I didn't feel like I was going anywhere with the club. So I started going through and training with other clubs, which my instructor wasn't keen on because he wanted, it's like he saw that as being disloyal, which I never was, but I needed more. Twice a week wasn't enough for me. The classes were too big. Um, we just weren't getting enough attention. And to be truthful, the instructor didn't get my name right after 6 years. So this is a guy who's not actually the best instructor. And I knew this. So as a cocky 16-year-old, I thought, I can actually instruct better than this guy. So I got to the stage where I was saying, look, can I do the warm up and stretch? And he'd let me do this. And, I was using scientific techniques at the time and looking for, I was researching how to warm up and stretch properly. Because a lot of people are having problems with the knees with all the bunny hops and all the old school exercises that we used to do. So even by 16, I was already thinking a little bit more about seriously about developing my taekwondo, and I was working with other people. Um, and then after that, it was basically the next thing again was an American influence. I went to summer camp in 1987, and it was an underprivileged camp from kids from New York. So I got kids from Queens, Harlem, Yonkers, all these sorts of places, and we would teach. After at that time, Mike Tyson was a big role model, and a lot of the guys were trying to follow his lead, as it were. No criticism of the Americans, but all the American counselors quit in the first 2 weeks. So it's just European counselors that were looking after these kids. And, it was hard work. It was emotionally hard work and it was physically very draining. But I knew that if I could teach these guys, I could teach anybody. When camp finished, four of us traveled down the East Coast. And although I didn't train with anybody, I sort of like looked at the yellow pages and saw all these Taekwondo clubs listed in the pages and saw posters and things of places. And I thought, actually, I might give this a go when I get back to the UK. There's massive unemployment in the UK at that time. The mining industry, which all my family had been involved with, had closed down and been decimated. So I thought, I'm going to give this a go. And I traveled out to my local region. I was traveling about 750 miles a week as a 19, 20-year-old trying to teach Taekwondo classes in other places. And that's how Quest started. And just to I'm not waffling, sorry, I'm waffling on here, but the reason why it's called Quest is that in 1988, when Taekwondo was made its debut in the Olympic Games, I was training 7 days a week. I was pretty fit, I was active, I was strong, but I was in the wrong organization. I got no chance. I got the wrong coach, the wrong instructor, the wrong organization. And the reason why Quest, my club, is called Quest is that I always, my mission, my goal, my objective was always to give my students the opportunity to fulfill the potential, which I may have been. I wasn't that great a player, to be honest, an athlete. I don't like saying player. I don't know why I said that. I was never that great in that sense, but I should have had a chance. I didn't have a chance. and that's why it's Quest. So sorry, that's a very long answer on that first part.
It's a great answer, and I'm just kind of reflecting upon how much we have similar backgrounds. I didn't understand sparring from fighting. I went to a camp for underprivileged kids. I actually taught Taekwondo in camp, and I'm surprised I didn't. I was trying to train for the Olympics at the same time, and so I was a summer camp counselor and met many great coaches and athletes, and quite frankly, people from the UK in the process. But you've mentioned a few things that spur interest in me, but one of them is you transition through many roles from an athlete to a coach to international board members. How did that shift your perspective on Taekwondo with each of these roles?
Well, I think my timing was very lucky. I think Taekwondo changed from an indigenous Korean martial art to a world sport and still kept the martial art element of it. I feel it has. So I've grown with Taekwondo, from being something that people have never heard of in the UK to we've got two boys from Yorkshire going to the Olympic Games. So, it's well known in our communities now. So I've been very fortunate with timing. Um, I first got involved with the Great Britain team. Um, Again, it's an American influence. A guy called Brett Moldenhauer who came over from visiting relatives in Yorkshire. He called into my Taekwondo club, and at that time it was still quite young. It was a very young club, so I didn't really have anybody. So I said, look, down the road in Doncaster, we've got the Great Britain team coach and the Great Britain team manager. Do you want to go down and we'll do some work with them? So we did. He stayed over for about a week and he did quite a few training sessions with us. But more relevant for me is that I started working with a guy called Pete Adamsons, and from there we just took every opportunity we could to progress British Taekwondo, GB Taekwondo. Originally, we worked with the women's team, then we got the men's team as well. And it was just one opportunity after another. But it was a case of why did he become a board member? Well, the team needed more representation on the board because we need to try and get funding for the team. So, okay, I put myself forward for the board of British Taekwondo and we got on it. So it's necessity and opportunity, I think is simple. How Taekwondo has changed since then is realizing that it's the best way of putting it. We are an underperforming activity. If you look at triathlon was recognized at the same time as Taekwondo was, and yet they get more media coverage, they've got more sponsorship, this sort of thing. So it's like we've got this wonderful product that but we haven't fulfilled our potential yet. And we've got time, we've got plenty of time. In England, you get used to talking about hundreds of years, not years. So with our history, we've got time to do things. So I think it's just a case of necessity and opportunity, making those two work. We need to make some changes. Here's the opportunity to do it. Sometimes, you run into a brick wall. Sometimes it's time. Occasionally, two or three times, I said, right, this is it for me. I've stopped. I'm going to take a step back, and I've had a few years where I've just been in. Some people call it the Taekwondo wilderness or just out there, but it's basically whenever I've not been involved with the boards or teams or whatever, then I've just trained like crazy myself. Improve my own physical training and also work with students more. Because always, whatever role that I've had, I've also been a club instructor since 1988, and that's been, my focus. That's always where I've gone back to. So if I've not been working on this committee or that committee, then the focus has been my club.
That's going to lead us into our next question, and you've mentioned something that resonates with me. It's people forget that Taekwondo is a personal journey and that it's a goal-oriented journey, and you don't necessarily need to be always in a role where you're leading something, but when called upon, you can. But coaching has played a significant part of your career. What are some of the key principles that guide your coaching philosophy, and how have you seen them impact your athletes or the ones that you've reached through the GB performance program?
I think I want my players to be happy. I want them to be healthy, and I want them to be able to fulfill their potential. But I also want them to have any opportunity that's taken for, make sure that we give them the opportunities. But the most important thing about what we do is that it's an individual sport. So from a coaching point of view, you might lead a session of 20 people, you might lead a session of 30, whatever number, but everybody's an individual. So, from me, from a specific, if I'm talking about coaching technique, is that you recognize the factors that make up that individual and you work with those, the strengths and the weaknesses. You don't say, okay, this is what's working in Taekwondo right now. This is what we're going to be I want 60 people doing this, or I want 30 people doing the same footwork drills over and over again. That's okay in a club level. That's okay when you're instructing. It's not okay when you're coaching. When you're coaching, you work with the individual. So I'd say that you can never really be coaching. You can be instructing hundreds of students. You can be teaching a seminar. You can inspire people, and hopefully people will learn from that. But coaching, the athletes number that you're coaching is probably going to be about 12 to 15 at tops, I would say.
And that's a great point. You have hit, to be honest, one of the fundamental ideas of coaching athletes, and that is, and I always say this: a good coach can help a good athlete and a bad athlete. A great coach can help great, good, and bad athletes because they understand the uniqueness of the athlete and how to bring the best out of them. A bad coach can't help anyone. That's a different story. But your experience as a WT broadcast commentator is unique. What insights did you gain from seeing Taekwondo through this lens, and how did it influence your understanding? Because you mentioned the sport's, challenges with global appeal. So how did it help you make an opinion about that? But more importantly, what do you see as a result of that?
I think there's a few different areas to discuss on this one. The actual benefit for me was that I'd run the Olympic Games. I started to commentate probably 18 months later. It's not the first time I've done it. I've done it way back in the 90s. So I got a very limited experience, but I took this forward with WTA. And I think that after the Games, I think they were very happy with the job that I'd done under quite difficult circumstances, which I know you've mentioned we'll ask later. But we started with the TV commentary, and the production values weren't great, and it was quite a challenge in learning how to do it. I was fortunate because I was mainly working on the Grand Prix to start off with, the new Grand Prix system. And a lot of these athletes have been involved in the Olympic competition or were high-level athletes. So one, I knew the athletes. I knew the referees because I was an international referee before the Olympic Games and way back from the 90s. So I knew the referees. I knew the players, which I thought was really important as a commentator, that you need to, when the match is not that exciting, there's some interesting story about these guys because every one of them's got a story. So I always try to be positive about the games. I know some people critique the style of it and everything, but I was always trying to be positive. And a little bit, I liked, because I did know the rules. It's when an appeal comes in, I know what it was for. Where some people would say, "Well, I'm not sure what's happening here." I always try to say, "I think this is happening." And yes, I'm right, or no, I'm wrong. It's completely wrong. So I think for commentary, we need good commentators for the sport. I've just watched a football match. England were in the European quarterfinals. England soccer.
Congratulations. I knew that's why we were meeting a little bit later. I was watching that same congratulations.
Well, the penalties was the most exciting bit of it, which is there's, millions of people in England sat on the edge of the seat, because we've not got the greatest, history of penalty taking. And, then all of a sudden, these guys today have just been absolutely amazing. But, for some of that match, as an Englishman, we've not had a great European soccer championships. And, I'm not that interested in other sports, to be truthful. I'm only interested in Taekwondo. When I was in the Olympic Games, I could have gone and watched other sports, but I didn't. I was so focused on what I was doing with the Taekwondo. So I think we need commentators who are passionate about the sport, who know the people in it, and know the rules and things.
And I think that's a great segue, because we want to talk about your London organizing committee role. and that was a major event. And can you share some of the behind the scene challenges and the triumphs from being the Taekwondo sport manager?
I think until you've worked on Olympic Games, you've got no idea of the scale of the event. It's like 26 World Championships all in 2 weeks in the same location. And I started off as technical operations manager. So I was given putting the Taekwondo knowledge into the event. And we had meetings. I was actually basically this is a one ring, one contest area competition that goes over 4 days with 128 players. It's a very, very simple, very, very easy format. But I was in London for 2 years beforehand planning this one event, and it's working with all the other functional areas. Is this chair for the referees ergonomic? Is it being responsibly sourced? And there's the legal aspect of it, the broadcast coverage, working with the OBS, working with WTF as it was then, working with all the interested parties and everything. So I think the biggest challenge of the Olympic Games is just the scale of the event.
So, was there anything in particular that you can remember that caused you to have something that you thought you couldn't solve and then you ended up solving?
Well, about 8 weeks before the games itself, the sport manager, a guy called Andrew Link, who'd done a lot of the planning and preparations for the game, stepped away from the role. There's quite even to this day, I can't tell you why. I don't know the details why. So I was left in charge of running the Olympic Games as technical operations manager and as the sport manager 8 weeks before the games actually was due to start. The the biggest challenge was at that time keeping WT, keeping all the vested interested parties satisfied that I could actually do both roles.
This leads me into my next question because I think the fundamental. I'm sorry for my distraction. My daughter's. I had to grab my daughter. This is real life. The Quest Taekwondo has produced several Great Britain performance program athletes. How does your club foster such talent, and what sets you apart from other Taekwondo centers?
I think two of the kids that were that are now in the program actually started in other Taekwondo clubs and then came to me because I created when as cadets I'm talking about, but we created a pathway. We could put it's like I said earlier, it's doing the right training, being up to date with the training, competing regularly, both home and abroad, and presenting them with opportunities, working on things like sponsorship, raising their media profile, all of these sort of things. It's just doing the right things, So we've had it's knowing what the right things are as well, though, and that's the thing because nobody tells you when you open a Taekwondo school that actually, to get an Olympic athlete, yes, you need to have somebody with talent and skill, but they actually need to be on this competition circuit. They need to experience against these guys, and it's like you can be. I don't know if it's the same. I'm sure it will be the same in the States. There's a lot of big fish in very small ponds, and they are trying to you know, hold on to everything. And what you've got first to do, if you've got talented athletes, is you've got to say, look, it's here. You've got to go. We've got to get it from everywhere. And it's like, I am not the font of all knowledge. I will give you opportunities. I will give you possibilities, but then we'll take it from other places. But, we have a, saying that this is going to sound like completely opposite of what I've just said. There's a mantra by the players actually came up with years ago, and the first one is again it's American influence. It's in Mike We Trust, and we had some players who would travel with a different coach to a competition in Europe, and they weren't able to compete, and because of administration stuff. And one of my athletes was with them, and they were at the end of the wit's end. They thought, I'm not going to be able to participate in this competition. So he phoned me and I said, look, whoever's the most important guy in the room, give him the phone and let me speak to him. And 2 minutes later, they're in the competition. And to my play, the other guy said to him, I don't know how you've done this. And he said, in Mike we trust. So that's rule number one. Rule number two is Mike's always right. Okay, which is completely different to everything I've just said. And but rule number three, I'll explain it. And basically, I'll never say when I'm coaching, I'll never say um, one, I'm going to keep them happy and healthy. That's the main thing, and safe. But usually I'm right with what I say. So if it's happy for them to think I'm always right. But rule number three is Mike's right even when he's wrong. So basically, okay, I want if I tell them let's say if I say, oh no, come off the back leg, and they do it but without conviction and they get countered, you know, they've suffered. Maybe they've got hit and got a 3 points against them, whatever you, for doing what I've said, but they didn't do it right, so it's there. So these are it's sort of a semi-joke and everything. And then, you get to the stage where some of your players are saying to you, what should I do or how should I be with this one? And it's like, just, hey, don't be crap, you know. And it's just, and that becomes a joke as well. Hashtag DBC, and then hashtag was not crap. This sort of thing. So it's having a little bit of fun with it as well, and connecting with them, connecting with your athletes, and have basically they've got to have faith in you. But a lot of that faith is down to you want their best interests. You've got their best interests at heart.
And I think that's true. I remember coaches, I had a lot of challenging coaches, but I had one particular coach. I watched him coach one of my friends, and he sits the guy down in the chair and he goes, kick, punch, win. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, I got that part. You got any idea on how? But I've had some very interesting coaches. I was lucky, I learned how to self-coach myself, and but I give credit to all my coaches who sat in my chair, regardless of the outcomes. But you're right, as coaches, we need to believe we're right. Our athletes need to believe we're right, despite the outcome, right? So
Create athletes that are capable of being in that chair. It doesn't matter who's in that chair, whether it's me or somebody else. They have to know their own game plans. They have to know, what their strengths and weaknesses are. And they need to be confident in the ring. I can remember as a kid going to a competition, and you know, I was in a really tough match, and I came back to my coach and said, "What do I need to do?" And he's, "I have no idea. I don't know. Can I have a drink? No, forgot to bring water." So it's like, okay, does my hair look nice? This sort of thing. There's nothing. That was
uh,
historically, as bad as it got. So, and he wasn't. He was a really nice guy. Don't get me wrong,
yeah.
but he forced into that chair, and he should never have been there. And that's again why I try and create a team of coaches rather than just be myself.
I'll leave you with one final story, and this is a famous coach from the U.S., and he's coaching one of my friends, and my friend's fighting in his first World Collegiate Championship. Mike Kim is his name, and the coach is Sang Chol Lee. So Mike is fighting the Korean guy, and he's like, "Oh my gosh, man, this guy's crazy fast, and I just hope I can survive this first round, and let me get through this round, because then I'll get back to the chair, and Master Lee, Coach Lee, will definitely know what I should do." So he kind of gets through the first round, and he's all verklempt, and he looks at Coach, and he goes, Coach looks at him and goes, "Oh my God, he's so fast and he's strong. What are you going to do?" And I love that story, because first it's Mike Kim, and second of all, we've all been in that situation. Well, listen, you've been involved in hosting numerous national and international championships. What goes into organizing such events, and what are the key ingredients for creating successful and memorable competitions?
Well, when I was a kid, a young man, I organised some of the worst competitions I've ever been to, sort of over ambitious with grade divisions and things like this. So first of all, you learn from your mistakes. Um, but really it's planning and preparation. As simple as that, the planning and preparation. Um, Surround yourself with a good team, because if you're working by yourself, you'll end up, you know, just running about like a headless chicken. So it's have a good team around you, plan, prepare, and I was once at a BOA meeting, and it's like prepare for manage the what ifs, okay, control the controllables, and manage the what ifs. The what ifs is what if this happens, what if that happens. So management is managing the what ifs, but control everything that you can do. So I think that's an important lesson that I learned quite young. And then basically, always, whatever you're doing, demonstrate your passion and your enthusiasm for it. I sometimes see people at taekwondo events, and it's like, hey, do you really want to be there? It's like, you know, okay, I'm not a barrel of laughs and smiles. I'm not a outgoingly, too outgoing, friendly person at competitions. Like to focus on what I'm doing, but you know, um, I like taekwondo. I like to be there and enjoy it. And if it's an event, get out there, and show that you're enjoying it and that you want to try and help people. You want to try and give the spectators the best experience. You want to give the athletes the best experience. The coaches, the officials, we have lots of issues like every country does with the officials, sometimes not being good enough, sometimes being overworked and, being at too many events. So I try and look after the officials as well. And, I think that's quite important. Demonstrating enthusiasm and try and look at things from other people's point of view. I've been a parent as a taekwondoist. I've been an athlete. I've been a coach. I've been the referee. I've been the event organizer. I've been the guy that stood on the doors and the weigh-ins and things. So I know what it's like in virtually every scenario. So it's basically when somebody comes at you with a question, go at it from, okay, try and see it from their point of view, but then don't try and sell them the bigger picture because none of those people want to see the bigger picture. When you're coaching, right, you're bothered about your athletes, you're bothered about your timing, getting on and off the ring. So anything that I say to you is that, hey, look, I need you to go over here now because you're not going to, because the schedule will work better if you do that. You're not interested in that. You want the best for your athletes. So I understand that and take that into consideration. But at the same time, sometimes it will be, you need to be over there now, and you have to use the authority sometimes.
Well, it's going to bring me, I want to transition. We have both served in various governance boards within our countries and then outside of our countries and on a bigger world stage. What are the biggest challenges and opportunities you've encountered in Taekwondo governance?
I think that Taekwondo is moving forwards. I think that we were struck, if I look at it from an Olympic point of view, from you guys being in the demonstration sports eras, and we've sort of there was the Korean dominance that had an effect there, and they put in a selection system where you got continental selections to try and even out the representation, so one country wasn't dominating too much. And we also, from a Taekwondo point of view, we're a transition sport. We fit in. We only have 128 players, 4 days of competition. We fit in behind fencing and before boccia, as in London or something like that. So the thing that I would like to see more is a Taekwondo program being expanded in the Olympic Games so that we're not, right, and the selection system changing. A lot of this is from a GB Quest Taekwondo point of view, because I've got an athlete that is in minus 57 kilograms female, was one of the top athletes in the world, a constant medal, a podium winning medalist from the age of 16 onwards. And she's not going to the games. Now, as an athlete, she has defeated players in the 57 kilogram category, and the 67 and the plus 67. So if you're top in the world, if you're in the top 10 in the world, and this is true in Korea, it's true in lots of countries, we've got the best play. I think a lot of us agree that Taekwondo to get into the Olympics is one of the hardest things to do. But when you're actually there, it's not necessarily the toughest competition because, in the traditional sense of the competition, because you don't have all the best world athletes there. The top players are not all represented there. There's not enough places. We are a sport where we have 8 weight categories for men and 8 weight categories for women, and yet when we go to our showpiece event, it's cut in half. So I think the thing that I would most like to see is an expansion of the Olympic program.
I think that's a great point, and it's always been. I've been involved in various crafting of selection processes, whether it's domestically here in the States or on the international stage, and then having worked with the IOC in creating an understanding of what would be possible for Taekwondo, for other sports. I understand what you're saying, and it will continue to be a challenge. And then you fundamentally have to ask yourself, how do you want to balance inclusivity and what some would posit as a continual inclusion of the sport in the games with excellence? And I'm a meritocracy guy. I would much rather have the 16 best. I want to face the 16 best players in the world. I don't want to face somebody from, and no dig on anyone in particular, Oceania, that has two or three countries to compete against, and they get a spot because they're from Oceania, and he's my first match. So that's a wasted match, in my opinion. But I don't want to. We're going to have a. I'm going to invite you back for a longer conversation about these sorts of topics, along with Dr. Kapner and a handful of others that are passionate about what I would call future casting of where we find ourselves. But you've been recognized as Coach of the Year, which makes you and one of the most effective leaders in the sports world. What advice would you give to coaches and mentors that are leading and trying to lead?
Well, my coaching award was quite a few years ago, and it was a regional one. I don't claim to be a brilliant coach. However, I was a coach tutor for a long time for British Taekwondo. I'd say just first of all, study Taekwondo. Read as much as you can. Look at it from different people's point of view. The internet's amazing now. There's so many. You can be watching matches, look at other people, see what's happening on the bigger field, and then experience as much as possible. If you want international success, you've got to be on the international circuit. And to be truthful, we've got one of the strongest, continental regions in the world, and that's because we can travel to different countries quite easily. I can fly over to the Netherlands and then drive to Belgium or Germany quite comfortably, or get on the train. And we're the most isolated island, if you like, nation in Europe. It's easy for the mainland Europeans. So I think first of all, it's open your eyes to the bigger picture, and then learn, and don't be scared of learning. Try and take influences from different people. You're not going to get it just from one source. And finally, don't take what people say at face value. Everybody has their own agenda that they're working towards, which is hopefully the best performances, the best opportunities for their players, or to grow their organization or whatever, and it's basically, when you're telling your athletes, if they go and train somewhere else, if they have to go somewhere else as part of a squad or things, is that listen, be polite, be respectful, be open-minded, take what's useful, bring it back, and if it's useful, I'll take it as well, and just keep on learning. We're first and foremost students of Taekwondo, whatever your role, whatever your grade.
Yeah, great point. We need to be, and we try to be perpetual students ourselves, and we instill that we should be showing our athletes and, quite frankly, our contemporaries what is necessary. And that I hear in everything that you've said today. But we're going to transition to outside of Taekwondo, just because I think that too many people think that that's pretty much all we do. You have some other interests that you like. And could you share some of your outside hobbies that you think complement your work and personal life?
First one is kickboxing. And two reasons for this. First of all, I'm from, like I said, I've told you before, way back before my Taekwondo days, I did boxing. And my dad was a keen amateur boxer. And so I've always liked the hands. And one of the criticisms that people that don't know Taekwondo say, oh, you can't punch. And it's like, well, I could always punch, So, the concept of not being able to punch always irritated me. So, that's why I got a slight interest in kickboxing there. But the real reason I got into it was that I was training before I got my full-time Taekwondo centers. I was training in a sports hall, and half of the sports hall was Taekwondo, and half the sports hall was badminton. Now, the badminton club closed down, and the sports center manager, in his wisdom, put a kickboxing club in at the same time as mine. But the door was at his curtain. So all my inquiries were going to this kickboxing club. So I really hated this kickboxing club that was going on at the same time as my Taekwondo club. But I could hear what he was saying, and I thought, this guy actually is pretty impressive. I like what he's saying. So I'm listening. I'm teaching a Taekwondo class here, but I'm listening to this kickboxing guy there, and I'm really impressed by what he's saying. So when I opened my first Taekwondo center, my first martial arts center, I said to him, look, do you want to come with me? I don't want to just do Taekwondo all the time. Do you want to come and have a club with me? And he said, yeah, let's do it, because he hated the sports center managers too. And we ended up becoming good friends. A guy called Chris Jansen Perez, we became good friends. And I started training with him. And then eventually I became the instructor in the center as well, because he was so busy with the international events that he was doing and things. So that's how I got into kickboxing. So it's not that different to Taekwondo. I find that sometimes people, kickboxing does what it says on the tin. It's boxing with kicks involved with it, and it's an easier sell. But I do enjoy it. I do enjoy like hitting the bags, and I do enjoy sparring. And it's Taekwondo is always. I'm always instructing. I'm always coaching. The kickboxing gives me a way of training myself. And then the other thing that I like to do is the cinema. I go to the cinema quite a lot. I think I've got the mental age of a 12-year-old regarding cinema. I'm a big Star Wars fan, and all the science fiction things. And I think maybe I didn't want to be a Taekwondo master. Maybe I wanted to be a Jedi master. So I love cinema. I love all aspects of cinema. It's just pure escapism. I don't really, you know. As a kid, cinema was, going to the cinema was a treat with your parents. I remember going to see Star Wars in 1977 when it first came out and things. So I just think it's wonderful escapism. So those are my main things, and other than my family and my dogs.
We were separated at birth, and those I trained with one of the best, arguably the best kickboxer ever in the world, Sifu Paul Vizio. Just an amazing individual. He's responsible for my Olympic success, and I say that every chance I get. And then my second passion, and I was known as the Jedi when I was coming up, is I love science fiction, and specifically that particular thing. But I'm gonna give you one last question, and again, I'm gonna invite you back for that thing we talked about, which was the longer symposium, and we're actually working on hosting this in Korea as well. But if you could change one thing about the world of Taekwondo today, what would it be and why?
Good question. I think that it's not a specific thing. The thing is that I think that I live by, somebody once told me, the more cake there is on the table, the more there is for everybody. And I think that the problem in the Taekwondo communities, there's two problems. One, people are very tribal and try and keep things under control all the time in their organization, their network, and that's detrimental to the development of the world sport. And that's at national, continental, and world level. It's the more cake there's on the table, the more there's for everybody. So I think that is one of the big issues. And then I think it's that we don't celebrate the product that we have got. Just sidetracking slightly, I once did a media presentation at a European Olympic selection event, and I got a guy to stand up, and I was in a suit and tie, and I kicked the cigarette out. I said the guy got a box of cigarettes on the table. It was a foreign, he wasn't smoking it, and I put a cigarette in his mouth. I told him to put a cigarette in his mouth, and I kicked it. And I'm dressed in the suit, and I kicked the cigarette out of his mouth. And everybody in the room, they're all journalists, and all going ooh ooh ooh. And I said, look, that's one kick that's exciting. You've all got excited. You've all reacted to this. When I take you downstairs and the Olympic qualification events going on, there'll be lots of kicks going on. There's going to be lots of excitement. It's up to you as journalists and as reporters to report on the excitement of the individual actions. So I think that we've got an amazing product that we don't really value ourselves enough. And again, partly because people are tribal and trying to hold on to things, we haven't been able to connect with, like the media, like the movies, all these sort of things. We haven't done that enough in Taekwondo. So I think that's one thing that's got to change. A mindset's got to change, that this doesn't belong to us. This is the world of Taekwondo, is everybody's. And, we might not agree with the people. We might not like the people. We might really dislike the people, but, we are a World Taekwondo family.
And I think those are, those are great words, and I couldn't agree more. For me, when I come away from these podcasts, I'm always humbled by the opinions I get of the people that are on, but more importantly, I get some great new knowledge and then great things to take away, and that's certainly going to be one of my takeaways. I'll leave you with one comment that was made by one of my good friends who, John Holloway, I believe. And John said, his instructor said to him, Taekwondo is for everyone. However, not everyone is for Taekwondo. And I thought it was great. Well, Master McKenzie, I want to thank you today. You have been, as expected, just an amazing guest. And I want to thank you for taking out the time and especially in light of the fact of England's latest win on 5 penalty kicks in a row. And I was convinced that they were going to miss one or the other guys were going to at least block one. But I look forward to seeing you shortly. Will you be going to Paris?
I don't have any role in Paris, but I think I will probably be over there as a spectator and supporter. Yeah.
Well, enjoy it, and we'll catch back up with you on that. But again, on behalf of the Masters Alliance podcast, I want to thank you for your time today, sir.
No, thank you very much. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, as I told you, that was going to be a terrific podcast with an amazing individual who has nothing but passion for this martial art and sport we do. I was surprised at how much we had in common and how similar our lives were in our path and our choice of service. Master Michael McKenzie is a tribute to what is possible if you set your mind to something and choose to accomplish it, using your passion and your expertise to help others be better than they thought they ever could be. Great Britain is lucky to have him, but I am lucky to call him a colleague and a friend, someone who will stand as a testament to what Taekwondo should be, can be, and will be if you allow it to be for yourself. This has been a Masters Alliance podcast uncut. I am Herb Perez, and check out our other podcast and my new book, One Champion's Pathway, available on Amazon.